Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a new video in my Life Lately series. It's been a really long time since I've recorded one of these videos, and I'm not entirely certain I remember how to do it. But it was at request that I have put together this video for you, which makes me feel very warm and fuzzy that you are interested enough to ask for a Life Lately update. I'm recording this on December the 21st, or in December, on December the 21st. So quite late in the year. And I started doing this Life Lately series last year to supplement my YouTube content when in the winter months, because there's no gardening and very little renovation happening. I wasn't so sure how much you enjoyed these videos, so I didn't prioritize it for this winter period. But as someone has reached out and asked, I thought I would oblige. So forgive me if I am not entirely in the flow of putting these together well yet. It might take me a bit of practice. And I thought that this time, rather than focusing only on what it is that I've been doing in December, would sort of be a little bit of a catch up of some things over the last couple of months or so, sort of since the end of the heavy gardening season in around about October. So, without further ado, I shall begin with a update on what it is I have been reading and listening to this month. You can see I've got a stack of books here. That's actually a pencil case, but there's a stack of books here that I want to talk to you about. So I'm just going to pick them up in the order that I can grab them. So the first one is this book. It's called Clara and the Sun, and it's by Kazuo Ishiguro, who is the author of quite a lot of well-known works like Never Let Me Go and something else, which you will probably know. This is a book that I probably wouldn't have selected on my own, but as part of my monthly book club, we have a book swap. And so this was a book swap book. A couple of people from book club have read it, and so I asked if I could take the copy. For those of you who are not familiar, the way that my book club works, it's a bit different to other book clubs because we don't all read the same book. It means that you're not under pressure to read a book in a particular amount of time, and it also doesn't matter if you miss one. So everybody just comes and shares what it is that they have been reading and enjoying since the last time they were at book club. So the book swap works really nicely in that context because it means somebody can come rave about a book, somebody else can borrow it, they might love it, they might not love it, and you can come back and have a conversation with it more organically, and you're not forced into anything. So this book, coming back to Clara and the Sun, was a book club recommendation. Several people had read it. Everybody seemed to really enjoy it. Some people really loved it. And I've spoken to some other people in real life about this book that they also love and enjoy, and particularly love and enjoy this author. So I had quite high expectations going into reading this, but I am not of the I absolutely loved it. It was a beautiful story, a very very well written story, very gentle. It is about a. I don't think it. I hope it's not a spoiler to tell you a little bit about it. But it is about Clara, who is an artificial friend, or an AF, and her reminiscences of her life's lived experiences, observations of human society in a time when artificial friends exist. So, not our life, not our world right now, but maybe a future, maybe an alternate reality. It's never really defined, left to your imagination. and Clara recounts the happy memories of her life as an AF. There is a sort of an undertone of sadness to the whole story. It's quite slow. It's very genteel, as I think is common with some authors. Um, it doesn't tell you all the details, which is a little bit frustrating. It sort of spans the space between science fiction and fantasy, perhaps. It was nominated for the Booker Prize, and I think deservedly so. It is certainly a book that makes you think. It's going to sit with me for a little while. That sort of undertone of sorrow is a little, it takes a little time to get over, but well worth a read. It's got some really interesting concepts in it, sort of around artificial intelligence, what it means to be alive, the origin of the human soul, genetic engineering and the moral consequences, and just some interesting ideas of sort of what I can only think of as being sort of common courtesy in some respects. So yeah, really good read. Well worth the effort, if a little bit slower, not necessarily a page turner, if that makes sense. Next up is Agatha Christie's The Dumb Witness. This is a book I read in October, I think, or possibly November. You may recall that I have a long-term project to read every Agatha Christie novel ever written, or short story collection, basically just everything I can get my hands on that was authored by Agatha Christie, in no particular order. When I started this project a couple of years ago, year or so ago, it was with the intention of getting all of the books out of the library. That has proven to be a bit more difficult, so I'm supplementing that now with picking up some copies in the charity shop when I find them. I think I got this one off eBay. Again, I just sort of pick them up when I find them. If I'm buying something else from eBay and I can pop a book in a basket, then I will do so. This one is one of my favourite. It's a Poirot. It was one of my favourites from the TV series because it's based around a dog called Bob. Bob, I think, is a fox terrier in the book, and it's really fun reading the books. And I will say this all the time: I'm very familiar with the TV shows. I've been rewatching them all the ones on ITV. And the experience of reading the books for the first time is very, very different to some of the television adaptations. And this is another one that's quite different. In some cases, the TV adaptations make a more sensible story. There's a few aspects of this that didn't quite make sense, but then I'm not entirely certain that they made sense in the TV either, so different choices. But I really, really enjoyed this. It was a really good read. It's the what I'm noticing is that the early Agatha Christie's are the better mysteries. This is a sort of a one in the middle, I think. But yeah, just loved it. There's sentences in here that I've really found very profound, just sort of offhand remarks that Poirot makes as he is making his overall observations. And that's what I really think I love about all of the Agatha Christie novels that I have read so far, is those observations of human psychology and sort of how we behave and how we can expect it to act. I would have loved to have marked the quote in this book that I was particularly fond of, and I do intend to go back and find it at some point. But yeah, continuing with the Agatha Christie project. I've been reading a lot of poetry recently, And my current poetry read is Lobster by Holly McNish. Um, there's a few. I'm reading this. I'm not reading this book in a linear way. I am just picking it up and sort of almost seeing what page I land on, or looking for a sort of poem or a particular theme out of the table of contents. The way that this anthology is put together is that the poems are intermingled with prose. And I must admit, I still read poetry like I'm studying GCSE English, which means that I annotate all over it what I think is happening, what my thoughts and reactions are. Um, so yeah, so this one, and the prose are just as interesting as the actual poems themselves. This was in a section about happiness, and there is a poem about shit and glitter. So, and the particular line that I enjoyed, which I shall read to you as a direct quote from this book, is I mentioned glittery shit because apparently there is a pill you can buy that makes your shit glitter. I don't know if this marks the peak of human genius or the fall of civilization. I thought that was deeply profound. So, trying to expand my knowledge for by reading some more poetry. Um, my current read, the rest of this pile of books are books that I'm reading as part of my qualification. So I am currently training to become a yoga teacher. So I've been reading dozens and dozens and dozens of books that are about yoga, yoga history, um, lived expressions of yoga, breathing, and sort of anatomy and physiology. I'm not listing all of those books here, although periodically they do show up in some of my other spaces, but I'm not going to go into the rest of this pile of books on that basis. But I am going to talk to you about the book that I am currently reading, which is this book called Calypso. It's by Oliver K. Langmead. And this is a book that I picked up in from a physical bookshop. I don't buy many new books. I think before this, the first new book I bought in ages was this one. So recently I've been on a bit of a spending spree when it comes to new books. Normally I prefer to pick them up secondhand. But I visited my local town where a new independent bookshop has opened, and I wanted to support them. So I went with the intention of hoping to find a book that I wanted to buy. I am a person who walks into bookshops and is beset by decision-making overwhelm. There are so many choices, and it's sort of also an element of sensory overwhelm because there's normally people in there, so busy noise and bright lights and colours and doorbells clanging as people come in and out. I find them actually not easy places to be, which is completely counterintuitive to many people who just sort of find bookshops their absolute happy place, but not so much for me. So I was getting quite worried that I wouldn't be able to find something that I would go home with, and I actually went home with two books. So this is the one that I'm currently reading. This came from the science fiction section, and it's a sci-fi novel written entirely in verse. So unexpected extra poetry in my life. And it's about a group of people who go on a long-term space exploration voyage to inhabit new worlds. Um, and it's not done in the way that some science fiction does, where everybody just goes into cryosleep and wakes up and they're in the new place. There is a live and active crew, and the crew knew that this was going to be a multi-generational voyage. And so some of the key project individuals went into a kind of a cryosleep, um, and they've woken up, and it's hundreds of years later. And so they have to deal not only with their intention of at least I think it's hundreds of years later. It's many generations later anyway, so hundreds of years works for me. So they're dealing with not only the mission to terraform and inhabit a new world, but also the fact that they've woken up into an entirely new society. Um, we've seen many examples through fiction of what that looks like when people uh, are put to sleep and wake up and the world around them has changed. So the society is different. They don't speak the same language anymore. Um, there are, what do they call it, schisms within the society. Um, and then also sort of dealing with the things like loss of family, recognizing that everybody that you left behind is dead, and you're not, and those kinds of things. So all beautifully written in verse. Like, I thought that I would struggle with the verse structures, and they do get, just by flipping through the book, they do get progressively more difficult to read, and each personality has their own, because it's done from there are 4 or 5 specific points of view, and each point of view has their own structure of the verse. So you can tell them apart just by the way that it's sort of laid out almost. But I'm finding it really difficult to put down. It's actually quite accessible. It's beautifully written. I think the joy of being able to tell such a heavy science fiction story in this format is that it doesn't have the space to use all of the long, complicated words. It has to be get you right into the place with few words as possible to fit into the verse style. So yeah, from that perspective, it's really well done. I've read the first 2 chapters. I think there are a total of maybe 5 or 6 chapters, 7 chapters. So not quite halfway through, basically, and absolutely loving it. Can't wait to see where it goes. In terms of audiobooks, I have been trying to move away from Audible. I'm not being very successful at it, I must admit. So all of my audiobook reading is still on Audible, but I'm finding it increasingly challenging. I don't like many of the changes that they've made to the app. I find that a lot of the titles that I listen to are no longer available in the app, even though my understanding as a member was that when I used a credit to buy a title, I owned that title forever. And yet many of them are now missing. So I'm broadly trying to move away from it, but I still also always listen to Audible to go to sleep. So I do put something on every night until I figure out how to get my content out of Audible and where I can play it instead. We're still stuck with Audible. If anybody has any tips, tricks, or ideas for this, please do let me know. I'm just going to open Audible so I can see what I've been listening to. So the book that I'm currently listening to, so this is the one that I do awake listening to, and really usually either only in the car or if I'm pottering around the kitchen, is The Reality Dysfunction by Peter F. Hamilton. It is a science fiction, and I've been consuming a lot of science fiction across a lot of all the media recently. So it is the first novel in the is it the Night Dawn trilogy? They're big, fat, heavy science fiction books full of lots of complicated terminology and science. Although the only thing that annoys me about them is that they don't deal with relativity. So everything happens in real time, even though that's not how space works. But if you can get over that, these were written in the 90s. I read The Reality Dysfunction about this time last year. It took me about 6 months to read it. It's a big, heavy tome. It was quite a slog to get through, which is why it took me such a long time to read. and now I'm listening to the audiobook. And I really like to, I often prefer to listen to audiobooks that I'm already familiar with. So books I've read, films I've watched, mostly books I've read. Because it's more difficult, I think, to maintain connection and always be listening. It's quite hard. I find it quite hard to be listening all the time and not miss things. So at least if I've read the book and I zone out for a bit, I can pick it back up again and I haven't missed too much. But when I'm listening to audiobooks, and I think this is the third time I've listened to the audiobook, I do pick up then on new details, and things that I missed the first time round or forgot the significance of, or because there's just so much information all the time. So I like re-listening. I'm not a great rereader, but I will re-listen to the same books over and over and over again, and so grasp that extra depth of knowledge and understanding about it. So that's what I'm quite enjoying with this one. But it's really long. It's something like 46 hours in total. Let me get the title details. 41 hours and 6 minutes long. So it is quite difficult to keep on top of. So this is what I put on when I'm largely in the car or pottering around the house, so that I can try and keep up with it. I've also been trying to listen to Clown Town by Mick Herron. This is the latest in the Slough House or Slow Horses series of books. Now a very popular TV show on Apple TV, but I don't have Apple TV, so I've only watched a few episodes. And this is the book that I've been listening to go to sleep with, and I can't get past about 3 minutes in. So I have no idea what it's about yet. When I finish listening to the Reality Dysfunction, I will then listen to Clown Town, so that I can actually find out what's going on. The reader, or the narrator, is Sean Barrett, and he just has the perfect tones for falling asleep to. Sort of quite a monotone voice, and he's the only narrator, which also helps for falling asleep because it's just one voice to sort of zone into and out of everything else. So yeah, so I'm trying to listen to that one, but not doing so well. And then the other book series that I'm falling asleep to most frequently is Ben Aronovich or Aronovich. Even the narrator of these books says his name different ways, different times. So I offer you two variations. But Ben Aronovich's novels series, The Rivers of London, I have read some of them. I've read quite a lot of the early ones actually, but the most recent ones I only have on audiobook. And again, I have listened to them whilst awake, and then I listen to them when they're asleep, when I'm sleeping. And the most recent edition of the Rivers of London series is Stone and Sky. There is one lead point of view in the Rivers of London, and then it's one of those worlds that has lots of spin-offs. So there are some novellas, there are a whole bunch of graphic novels. I think there might even be some other media that sort of broaden this out. So across the whole world building of the space where these novels are set, there are several different points of view and several different narrators that you follow. But in the main novels, there has only been one, which is PC Peter Grant, although he's not a PC anymore. He is a detective sergeant, I think. And he is when we first meet him in the first novel, Peter Grant is a trainee or probationary police officer in the Met Police, and he accidentally stumbles upon magic. And he goes on to become an apprentice magician and work with Peter Nightingale, who is aging backwards, or stopped aging. I think he stopped aging and then aged backwards and has now stopped aging. I'm not really sure. Peter Grant has definitely gotten older, but Nightingale hasn't got any younger or any older at this point. But at one point he was about 90, and now he's about 46. So um, anyway, these novels are so fun. They are so fun. I really, really enjoy them. I do make a point of always picking up the latest one. I tend to read the novellas rather than listen to them because they're the same. There's the same money. So the economics thing. I don't mind spending an Audible credit on a whole book, but I'm not spending a whole credit on like a bit of a book that only takes 3 hours to read. So yeah, that's how I focus this, and then I just put them all in a one playlist and just start the playlist from wherever I left off, and listen to them overnight. But I'm rambling. I haven't told you about this one. So although there are lots of different voices, the novels are mainly only from the perspective of Peter Grant. In this novel, though, it is co-narrated by Peter Grant and his cousin, also a magical apprentice, Abigail. And Abigail has a completely different experience of the magical world and magical community. So through her, we get to experience some many and varied interesting things, including talking foxes, who are just amazing. So yeah, so if you like sort of fun, magical fantasy based in a version of the real world that you would recognize as sort of a parallel world, a society that runs in parallel to the one we understand rather than being a parallel universe, then I highly recommend The Rivers of London by Ben Aronovich. And The Stone and Sky is an iteration of that, or an instance of that, that's actually set in Aberdeen. So there are in the audio some very questionable Scottish accents, but very fun, and highly recommend. That brings me very swiftly into, or not so swiftly, okay, I'm hoping that I have just solved the microphone challenges I didn't know I was having. So let's just see. So, in this section, I'm going to talk about what it is that I have been watching, films and television specifically. Um, I am not a great watcher of television. I often have the television on, but I'm not actually necessarily watching it. So, I tend to watch a lot of long running detective series. I like particularly connection to my Agatha Christie project, um, and sort of formula shows where you don't have to pay a lot of attention. Doesn't matter if I am, again, like with the audiobooks, zoning out for a bit or walking out of the room for a bit and coming back, I can still sort of follow along with what's gone on. So my most recent example of that is that I watched the available episodes of the show FBI on Amazon Prime. I think there were four or five series available, and I just sort of pressed play one day and carried on watching them until they stopped. Can't really tell you anything about it other than it's somehow connected to the Chicago universe, because a character out of Chicago PD turned up in an episode, which I found weird because FBI is set in New York, but mine is not to reason why. So I can't tell you that I highly recommend it unless you, like me, like having mindless shows on in the background that you don't need to pay attention to, in which case it is a good example. Um, Something that took a little bit more depth, but on a similar vein, I rewatched all of the Miss Marple episodes that are available on the ITV player, which is, I think, ITVX. Um, so there are two versions of those, which I didn't know. There's a version from the late 80s, which were my favourites. I think they were the ones I remember watching when I was a kid. And then there were some from the sort of the early 2000s into sort of the mid 2000s, where many of the stories just got
completely scrambled and over sensationalized, and it was sort of almost like they tried to turn Miss Marple into a bit of a film noir detective um, situation. So very much set, regardless of when the book was written or set. All of these stories were set in like the 50s, sort of yeah, just after the post-war era, really. Um, and a lot of the stories were really significantly altered from the originals, which is fine. Apart from, I remember being a child watching these particular mid early, well, I wasn't really a child, I was just very young, in comparison to now, watching these sort of early 2000s versions and actually thinking that they were really good. And now I'm looking at them with older, wiser eyes, thinking, oh god, they're a bit naff actually. But I have finished those, and I probably will watch them again. Um, I will probably will also rewatch all of the Poirots again at some point because I find them very sustaining, uh, and I'm familiar with the story. So again, it doesn't matter if I'm not really watching them; they're on for company more than anything. But I have been watching intentionally, or rewatching, I should say, is the TV series The Expanse, another science fiction. There are 6 series on Amazon Prime. I watched them as they were released, but I think I was watching them at the time with that same mindset of sort of they were on, but I wasn't really watching them. So I was sort of making my way through them so quickly, I didn't really have a clue what was happening after about the first or second series. So I've made a point of going back and watching them with intention. So I actually will sit down and watch these shows. Normally while I'm doing knitting, and I'm trying not to also be doom scrolling whilst watching, which is the other thing that quite often happens. Um, and they are just really good. If you have access to Amazon Prime, and like science fiction, then this is up there science fiction television. It's set in a future where Mars is colonized. There is a city on Luna, the moon, um, and the belt, or the asteroid belt, and the outer planets are also colonized, but this is where the sustaining of heavy industry is happening. So the belters, the population that lives there, are technically citizens of Earth, but very un, with no particular rights, if that makes sense. They're not. They don't. They aren't well thought of. They aren't well paid. They live a low atmosphere, no zero G life, which has significant impacts on their health and longevity. But they aren't compensated for this, and they really do just provide the materials that are necessary for us, Earth and Mars to. I think I just merged Earth and Mars into a new word there. Anyway, the materials that Earth and Mars need to sustain themselves, so ores and things of that nature. So, really interesting way to observe how we treat people who provide a service to us. It sort of has that reminiscence of what happened during the Industrial Revolution, where workers were maltreated by their employers and they started to unionize and demand better living circumstances. But that's based around a backdrop of you have no access to basic things to live, like oxygen and water and food are all dependent on being brought in um, from Earth and Mars and the outer planets. So the stakes are a little bit higher. Added to that, there is an element of first contact with extraterrestrial life, and that throws the proverbial cat amongst the pigeons, and everything starts to change. So we follow largely through the 6 series the same core set of characters. it expands just a fraction over time as you get to examine these really deep, fractious political situations. Um, I think that the world building and the creativity that's gone into this is amazing. They've developed a whole new language, which is called Belter, and it's based off my understanding from Google is that it's based off of the expectation that if you were going to the asteroid belt and to the outer planets for the purposes of mining, the populations on Earth with the best mining experience are largely from places like South Africa. And so it's largely those populations that have been taken to the belt and became the first belters. So the sort of the accents and some of the words are really familiar from African and South African heritage, but it's developed into its own sort of Creole based on South Africa was not the only place that mining populations came from. So what you have is this whole new society that's developed with a whole new language based on lots of other languages and culture based on lots of other cultures. So it's really really fascinating, and that's one of the big things that I have always really loved and admired about science fiction is just this opportunity to observe things that are happening in real life in our lived experiences, but from a different lens that perhaps makes them safer or more accessible to view, but also just that the possibilities of what would happen if this it's more the thought experiments of what would happen if we went there and we did this and this happened and what would happen next. And you know the creativity is just amazing. So that's why I am and always will be a sci-fi and fantasy nerd at heart. I don't know if this counts, which section this counts in. I'm going to call it film and TV. I haven't watched a lot of films, but I have twice been to the National Theatre live with my mum. So the National Theatre is a British institution um, designed to make theatre accessible to the masses, I suppose. I'm not fully familiar with its absolute charter, but it is a public entity, if you will, with a very large brutalist building on the South Bank in London, which I frequent as often as possible, right next door to the BFI, the British Film Institute. They occupy grounds in buildings in the same grounds. And many years ago, way before the pandemic, they started to live stream productions so that more people around the country could view them. You weren't dependent on being able to get to London and get tickets to the shows. Um, and I don't know if they still live stream them, but they definitely pre-record and then play at the cinema um, theatre shows that were stage productions. So it's a really nice way of being able to conveniently access medium that you wouldn't normally. So yeah, so it's theatre, but it's also kind of film because I watched it at the local cinema, and they often go into the small independent local cinemas. I've got one near me. And so I took my mum, and we saw the first play that we saw was I've just forgotten the name of it. Bear with. It was Mrs. Warren's Profession, which is a play by Bernard Shaw that was written in. Oh, now I need to Google that. I think it was like the early 1900s, and it's a play about, and it's set then, and the production still set it then. So sometimes they'll take plays and bring them into the future or bring them into modern times, but this one was production was based in the time in the time, and it's a film very much about morality, but it's also about class and misogyny and other things. And Mrs. Warren is a prostitute, I think is probably the best word, sex worker of the time, um, and as a consequence was able to buy herself independence and a level of power and respectability that was not widely available to women at her time. And she has a daughter whom she sends away to be educated. So the daughter, who is not brought up by Mrs. Warren, she is brought up by in boarding schools and by nannies and sort of by being uh, fostered, I suppose, into other people's houses. So she grows up with a very, very different lived experience. And Mrs. Warren and Mrs. Warren's daughter come together one summer, and it's the first time they ever really get to know one another. The daughter at this point is an adult and she is trying to make her way in the world. The mother is much older and is becoming um, more sentimental, perhaps, but she's looking forward to her daughter coming full time into her life so that she can take care of her and things of that nature. And of course, the girl, having been brought up in this completely different life, has a completely different set of expectations of what her life is going to entail. And it's absolutely not going to be about looking after her mother and pandering to her needs. She wants to go out into the world and make her own way. And then the daughter never knew that where the money came from in order to allow her upbringing. So she's got to sort of absorb and accept and figure out what she's doing with that information. Um, and it was a really, really well done. And one of the other interesting things about this particular production was that Imelda Staunton, who's a very famous English actress, um, plays or actor, plays Mrs. Warren, and her daughter, her real life daughter, Bessie Carter, plays Mrs. Warren's daughter. Which I can't imagine the conversations that as two actors together they would have had about those dynamics and how to work that together. But it must have been fascinating for them. So I really enjoyed that, and probably wouldn't have been. In fact, I absolutely know that there's no way I would have chosen to go and watch this if I had been able to go to the National Theatre. It wouldn't have been top of my bucket list, but I find it really, really interesting. It was interesting watching it with my mum, and the fact that my mum and I both had completely different perspectives on it as well. So yeah, so that was well worth watching. And the National Theatre Live also now offers a streaming service, so that's going to be I'm going to be my Christmas present to myself this year. Is going to be what access a subscription to National Theatre at home, so I can catch up on some of the other plays that I've missed. But the second play that Mum and I went to watch at the cinema, courtesy of National Theatre Live, was The Fifth Step. And this is a play about sobriety and the 12-step program. Um, it is a There's only two actors in the whole play. The sponsor, who is played by Martin Freeman, who you will know from many things such as The Office, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that kind of thing, The Hobbit. And also Jack Loudon, who is River Cartwright in the TV adaptation of Slow Horses. So, yes, lots of interconnected things in this episode. And he is new to the program and exploring his sobriety for the first time. So it's really, again, really, really interesting. A lot of work for two actors to do, just the two of them. It's very intense as they sort of, and it develops over a passage of time as well. So it's just them, their regular connections and their regular meetings. And it tells you a lot about the effort it takes to keep on your top of your sobriety, the sacrifices that must be made, the loneliness. I found it particularly interesting at this time in history to have this observation, especially as the lead characters were two men. So there was a lot in there about male loneliness and the societal expectations on men to sort of be a certain way, to hide their emotions, to put on a front, to be able to maintain their status. And so the journeys of these two individuals as they work their way into the program um, is really interesting, and the roles shift and change, and things happen as the passage of time happens, and it very much reminds you the effort that anybody struggling with addiction has to go through in order to maintain their sobriety, and that it can't be taken for granted. So that was a really powerful production. Again, probably not one I would have chosen if I had been going to the theatre. I doubt I would have watched it. But nonetheless, one that I am really grateful to have had the opportunity to see at home ish in my local cinema. Our next section is making and crafts. And actually, there's been a subtle progress has been made on the crafting front. You may recall that I am an exceptionally slow knitter. The last time I was recording these videos, I was knitting a couple of things. I think I was had a few things to go, but I was knitting a scarf, which I have finished, but I only finished it a few weeks ago. It is an infinity scarf. Um, it is a very basic pattern of mixed stockinette and garter stitches. Where's the camera for you to see? I Once I understood the pattern repeat, I just ignored the pattern largely and knit until I ran out of the first couple color of yarn. Part of me had hoped that I would be able to get the whole scarf out of that, but looking back on it, that was highly naive because the original pattern called for two balls of yarn, and to switch it over several times, and I didn't want to do that. So I just knit the one colour I had until it ran out, and that wasn't a big enough scarf. So I went and found out of my stash a second skein of yarn, and I added that into it, and I just followed the same pattern until I had the same number of rows, or same number of pattern repeats. And this is my dog walking scarf because the whole point of it is that I can put it around my head. Oh, I should have taken my glasses off first. When I have to take the dogs out in the cold weather, and I can sort of, yeah, keep my neck and my face nice and warm. So that is a finished object, which I'm very pleased about. Allow me to take a moment to redo my hair. My next finished object has been finished multiple times now, but it's this sweater that I'm wearing. I first finished this when I finished doing the knitting, and I next finished this when I did the steek, and I finally finished this again only quite recently when I got round to sewing on the buttons. It is the Trouville cardigan pattern, which I took the option to knit as a back to front cardigan. So the buttons are down the back. I hope you can see that. And I've had the buttons for a year and I didn't put them on. So I was wearing it as just an open cardigan for a long time. And now that the buttons are done, I can wear it as it was properly intended to be, as a back to front cardigan pullover. So this is the Trouville pattern. It took me absolutely ages to knit this at my very slow pace. A good 18 months, I think, for just the knitting. But yes, so I've been wearing, and since having the buttons on, I've been wearing it loads. So it was well worth doing. And note to self for next time is to prioritize getting the buttons on. My current knitting work in progress is this, and it's going to be a beanie hat. In Canada, I learnt recently that this beanie hat is called a toque. So I'm making a toque. It is knit in two color brioche style. Brioche is a style of double knitting, so it's the same front as it is back, reversible, I think they call that. I am really loving knitting it, which is why I only cast it on a couple of weeks ago. Um, and I have knit quite a lot of it already. I'm not quite at the decreases, but I wanted to learn. I wanted to get better at brioche. I've done a little bit of brioche knitting before. It's quite a complicated technique because you have to knit. You knit the same row twice essentially, and it's done with yarn over, so it's quite easy to get yourself into a bit of a mess. But I think this being just a really simple all over rib in two colour brioche and in the round has made it quite a fast knit and really quite a comfortable, like I enjoy knitting it, like I'm really sort of enjoy the experience of knitting it, plus it makes this just super squishy uh, fabric at the end of the day. You can see that I did struggle with the yarn changeover in the round. So this row is a bit questionable, but I think I have finally gotten the habit of it. You can see it better on the other side. Um, so there are bits where I did it right and bits where I've done it really wrong, but it's fine. I ripped it out and restarted it once already, so I wasn't doing it again. It's just going to be what it's going to be. Um, but yeah, I can't wait to wear this. This is yarn that I bought in Amsterdam. I was trying to find the bands several years ago from Stephen and Penelope. So if you are a knitter, you've probably heard of Stephen West. So I went on a pilgrimage to their store, their old store. I think they've moved. And this is their yarn, West wool, in a DK weight. And I bought this yarn with the intention of knitting a brioche hat. I think I had recently signed up to one of Stephen West's online courses to get better at brioche. Oh, I've just dropped a stitch. I drop stitches all the time on this. I've had to correct it so many times. So I'm getting much better at crochet as a consequence. So yes, I wanted to knit with Stephen's wool a brioche pattern as part of that development experience. So that's why I went and got these. And coincidentally, these are apparently the Dutch colours, orange and green. Or don't know if they represent the entire of the Netherlands or perhaps just Amsterdam, but that was what I was told. So this is my Dutch hat. And yeah, I just love looking at it. These little sort of really plump knit stitches and pearls. They're just beautiful. So I will be knitting another one. I think I will have loads of yarn left over. So I think I'll probably just finish this one and then immediately cast on another one. It's a free pattern that at some point I would have got off Ravelry. It's called The Brioche Starter Hat by Rihanna Kruss. And I've pretty much just followed the pattern. There were some weird instructions around tension, which I completely ignored. I just went down a needle size, I think. So I started it on 2.75 needles, and now I'm working on 3mm needles, and and cast on the requisite number of stitches and hope for the best. And I can just about try it on my head, and I think it's going to be fine. Yeah. And if it's not, I'll give it to somebody as a gift, because when I cast on the next one, I'll know better. Other making has largely just been around the kitchen. So I have gotten back into the habit of making my own bread, and I make about a loaf a week. I used to always make sourdough um, super regularly, because that was just the thing to do at the time. It was, even pre-pandemic, making sourdough was very on trend. Um, but because I'm still renovating the house and I don't have a proper oven, I have a just one of those microwave combination ovens. It doesn't get as hot, doesn't get hot enough to really make a nice crusty sourdough loaf. So I've been relearning how to make bread using fast acting yeast. So it took a little bit of time to get used to, but I think I've perfected my recipe for sandwich bread. So a soft um, sandwich loaf homemade bread, um, really enriched with butter and milk. Um, and able to cook in my tiny little oven that doesn't get very hot. So that's been working out really well. I've got a nice mix of half and half, so half wholemeal. Well, not it's not actually half. It's about a third wholemeal to white flour, so it gets a bit of nice texture in it. And yeah, so I've been largely focusing on perfecting that recipe, which I think I have now done. So that is one of my jobs for when I finish recording this video, is to go and make bread for the week. So yeah, that's then that become a really nice little ritual. I've also been making the effort to use up the things that I already have before I go and buy them. So I've almost emptied my freezer, which has in some ways resulted in some quite interesting meals. Not necessarily ones that I would recommend, but two just using pantry staples that I've really enjoyed, and some things out of the freezer that I made recently was a. My camera keeps cutting out, which I think is its way of telling me this video is getting way too long, but we're nearly there. Um, the recipe that I was halfway through telling you about was a mushroom, chicken, and butter bean stroganoff, which is like a one pan complete meal, using up. Well, I had to buy mushrooms, but everything else was sort of either in the freezer or in the pantry, and that was really delicious. I made it a couple of times actually, so if I remember, I will link it in the description for you. And the other recipe that I made was using up all the frozen spinach out of the freezer, was a saag paneer, using a recipe from BBC Good Food, which I will also link below if I remember. And I added to that, I bulked it out with chickpeas because I have thousands of those in my pantry and I wanted to use them up. So that is. Oh, and I did make a banana bread. You can't ever go wrong with a banana bread. Again, it was just a recipe from BBC Good Food. Came out absolutely perfect. And made use of the bananas that were slowly rotting on my kitchen work surfaces. I don't really know where to start with adventures, and life in general, because it's been such a long time since I've spoken to you like this, which is why this video has gone on way too long already, because I'm just not practiced at it. Um, but I did recently go on a trip to London to visit my office and hang out with my colleagues at a team meeting and a winter social party, which was really great fun. I work from home, so as much as I love working from home, I do also really value these opportunities to go and see my colleagues in person, because it does make such a difference to be able to have conversations that are not just about the job that you're doing right now. So that was a really lovely time. I didn't get to see any theatre, but I went for a really lovely dinner. Um, yeah, just had a nice time in general before coming home. Other than that, I went on holiday in September. Took the dogs and the camper van on a tour of Northumberland, which is a region in the UK, if you're not familiar with it. Great big national park, beautiful coastlines. If you've seen the Danny Boyle movie 28 Years Later, it's largely set there. The island inhabitants at the beginning of the movie are um, on Holy Island or Lindisfarne, which is an island just off of the coast of Northumberland, connected by a causeway, which you see as part of the film. It didn't fully inspire my reasons for going there, but it was quite nice to drive over that. And go, oh, I saw this in the film. So that was quite fun. The holiday was cut short because the weather turned dreadful. It really wet and stormy persistently. I think it was one of the first big storms of the winter season in the UK. Happened to be while I was out on holiday, and I had 4 or 5 really wonderful days away, and I plan to go back again, possibly next summer actually, and see it more in the summertime than in the late summer, early autumn. And other adventures sort of happen on a more micro level. But my ambitions for adventuring has been a bit curtailed this year because I have been focusing on renovation projects at home. So the renovation continues. I do owe a video update. I normally record an annual sort of benchmark update, which I will do at some point. Um, I wasn't going to do one this year because I didn't feel like it looked like enough had changed. But actually, there's been some quite significant changes. For posterity, I shall still do this. Um, but as I think I've been rabbiting to you now for well over an hour, I am going to say farewell. If you have made it this far, congratulations. You have great staying power. I will try and put as much information in the notes below as I can. I'm not yet certain when this video is going to go live. It will largely depend on when I get round to doing the editing. Um, but I hope to see you again in the future. Take care and see you soon.